Coming to you from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, it's time for the Gardening Simplified radio, podcast, and YouTube show. It's kind of like a combo meal at lunchtime, and for dessert, we offer you a website, gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, you've heard the phrases, easy come, easy go, take it easy. Easy does it, easy as pie, easy on the eyes, easy as falling off a log. And I remember those commercials from the 1970s and 80s, the Calgon commercials, where a lady is just frustrated with the traffic, the boss, the kids, the dog, and then she finally screams, "Calgon, take me away."
I remember those commercials too.
Yeah, lose yourself in luxury, bath beads, or whatever those things were. But you know, we're all looking for easy, and I really believe the key is letting go and of trying to control things, I guess. And that's much easier said than done. And spend time creating. Trade a portion of your consumption time for creating, and you'll start to see the world differently. Everything is inspiration, and the same is true in gardening. Now, Stacy, I'm familiar with garden center customers who will come up to me and they say, I need a plant that will grow to 4 feet tall and then stop. I want it to be able to grow in both sun or shade. I want it to flower, and I don't want to have to do any maintenance.
Oh, and don't forget, it also has to withstand the dog going on it all the time. And ideally, it will flower every single day of every single year for the rest of eternity.
You got it. So I wrote a little limerick, a real short one in this regard. I don't want a plant that looks cheesy or is so sick it makes me queasy. I want to set it and forget it. Don't want to have to sweat it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what people are looking for.
That is what they're looking for.
Yeah, now my Florida friends who say after storms or rain, Zephyranthes bust out into bloom, or rain lilies. This is a bulbous perennial in the Amaryllis family, but it's one of those plants that is easy peasy. And of course, one person's bulletproof easy plant is another person's invasive plant. I think of Muscari grape hyacinths or Siberian squill. That can be the case.
Yeah, you know, I think it really is a matter of, here's what I think. All plants are potentially easy to grow.
Okay.
The difference is that you need to plant them in the right place so that you don't have to work hard to make them look great. And therein lies the trouble. And that's why, you know, someone can say, oh, I can't get delphiniums to grow at all down here in Florida. And you can go up to Maine and delphiniums are growing all over the place, looking fabulous. It really is about the right plant in the right place and knowing what your conditions are. But as simple as that may seem to just say, the reality is a little bit different.
No, it's very true. It's well said. You know, a plant that comes to mind for me, Stacy, are the Oh So Easy roses. Now, I think that this plant is really well named because it's just gorgeous and so easy to grow. But I think back to the 70s and 80s when I was working in the garden center industry, we would have this group of people called the rosarians.
Ah, yes.
And they would come into the greenhouse or the store, and these were the magicians. These were the scientists. These were the people who knew how to grow roses and knew exactly where to cut them and how to treat them and overwinter them, and everyone depended on the rosarians. Now we have these own landscape roses like Oh So Easy, and, well, it's easy.
It is easy. And, you know, roses are such a great example because they do have this old vestigial reputation of being so difficult to grow. And they need spraying, and they need pruning, and they need deadheading, and they need this and that and the other. They need to be dusted and coddled. And the fact is that's not necessarily how roses were inherently. There were always easy care roses. But it's the hybrid tea roses that became so popular in the 20th century that kind of developed this mentality for people. And those are still around, but even those have improved. Even those are easier to grow than they were back in the day. And so, yeah, it's about your expectations and, of course, getting the right plant in the right place.
Well, I'm glad you're recording, Adriana, because that was really good. And that was all off the top of her head. That's really good. Now, is there anything easier, Stacy, than landscape workhorses, Hemerocallis, or daylilies. I think of the rainbow rhythm daylilies. I don't think there's much else in the landscape that is more of a workhorse and easy than daylilies.
Well, I feel like daylilies and hostas are like the sun and shade, components of one another. They're both like can't miss, easy to grow plants. But on the other hand, as more and more of us have to deal with deer, and those are two of deer's top two all-time favorite comfort foods, we do start looking at different plants to replace those. What else can we grow that's just as easy? And I think, one strong contender for the replacement of daylilies, if you have deer, is Nepeta, catmint.
Exactly.
Another very, very easy plant. Yep. And another plant that like you see in municipal plantings. I think that's a great indicator, right? If you're seeing a plant in city plantings, not to say they don't have a staff, but that staff does not have the time or inclination to go and dust and fuss over perennials and shrubs and make sure everything's growing well. They want stuff that just looks great and makes the town look great. With minimal time inputs.
Yeah, very true. That's why you often see Russian sage.
Yeah, another great choice, right? For sure.
Yeah. When it comes to trees, I've got to mention the inconspicuous hop hornbeam or ironwood, a tough understory tree. And what I love about this tree is that it's native and you find it all the way from Canada as far south as the Honduras. So this is a hard, tough, strong tree that doesn't get a lot of press, doesn't get a lot of attention, but certainly is one of those trees that I would classify as easy. Of course, herbs in general are easy and forgiving. If you think about chives or oregano or creeping thyme, come back year after year, and Stacy, really easy to grow.
Herbs are so easy to grow, and that's one of the great things about them. My herbs self-sow, so I always have an abundant, supply of them to cook with, and herbs are blessedly easy. We're very, very fortunate to have such useful and easy to grow plants and like attractive.
That. Blessedly easy. All right, let's just run through a few quick ones then. I still find ornamental grasses to be very easy, whether they're miscanthus, panicums, the Hakanakloa Japanese forest grass, carex, you've mentioned that a number of times, Stacy. Alliums, serendipity alliums. I love alliums. I think they're so simple to grow. The amazing daisies like banana cream, baptisia, sedum, agastache, smooth hydrangeas. I don't know if you agree with me or not, Stacy, but I think they're easy to grow.
They're easy to grow if you don't have deer, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. You mentioned Nepeta or Nepeta, however you want to pronounce it, right? Potentilla, we've talked about that before.
Yeah, one of the absolute easiest, especially if you live in a cool climate.
Exactly. Spirea, Itea, Brunera, Virginia, Heliopsis. I find Heliopsis, especially in sunny spots, to be so easy to grow and so rewarding.
Yeah, it's a big time. It's a flower powerhouse, that one.
Yeah, exactly. Great for cut flower gardens. And then, I have to have iris on my list too. And I think part of the reason I have iris on my list, Stacy, is because generally the deer and rabbits leave the iris alone. And I find them pretty easy to grow, at least if you don't have iris borer issues.
Yeah, and even if you do have iris borer, that's actually a fairly easy pest to manage overall. And, the cool thing about iris is that they look like they're hard to grow. Exactly. You grow some of these iris with these crazy color combinations.
Stunning.
And you look like you're some sort of, mad scientist, but really all you did was plant the thing at the right depth in the right spot, and you just get to sit back and reap the rewards.
Absolutely. Like Siberian iris. Love it. And if you don't have deer pressure, hosta is amazingly simple to grow, in my opinion. If you have a little bit of shade and you don't have deer, I think it's because the root system is just so tuberous and aggressive.
Yeah, it's a very robust root system. And, aside from slugs, hostas are pretty much pest-free. And even slugs are relatively easy to manage if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've got to throw yucca color guard in there, and some people are going to cringe because, if you plant a yucca, you're making a lifetime commitment. Plastic explosives probably won't even remove it 10 years hence. But I tell you what, in a dry, sandy area where I'm at, the neighbors at least really seem to love yucca color guard.
Well, color guard, that's a variegated one.
Right.
And that's a little bit better behaved than just the straight green one, which of course does grow everywhere. You know, I actually have some yucca that I have attempted to remove, and it was easier than I thought in our sandy soil. If you have clay soil, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, let's see what Stacy thinks is easy peasy lemon squeezy in Plants on Trial, and that's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where we are about to put a plant on trial. That is to say, we're going to tell you all about one of the Proven Winners Color Choice shrubs, and you get to decide if you're going to put it in your yard or not. And of course, today's plant on trial is going to be an easy shrub. But before I get into it, I want to add another kind of concept to the easy to grow discussion.
Okay.
The low maintenance discussion. And that is, you know, I think what different people consider to be easy or low maintenance does vary. You know, there really aren't any plants that you're going to be planting in your garden that are like completely hands off. I mean, there are some, but you might not be happy with the results. So what are your expectations for the plant based on what you are willing to put into it? And, you know, as I'm embarking on this adventure of removing my lawn and replacing it with plants, a lot of people are looking at me going, oh, that's going to be a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking back at them going, look at your lawn.
Exactly.
You know, people think of like, they don't think about the maintenance that they have to put into their lawn. Like that's different. Whereas, you know, with shrubs, perennials, bulbs, a lot of the things that we're talking about, that maintenance commitment that you have is really, really minimal. Pretty much anything you would grow, as long as you are planting it in the right place and not constantly trying to play catch up with, oh, the water it needs and the soil's not right. So every single year I have to amend the soil or I have to change the pH or I have to do this or that or the other. You know, as long as you are putting the right plants in your yard, that once or twice a year where they might need some pruning or, you know, something like that, or some fertilizing, that's very, very minimal compared to what most people are dealing with in their lawns.
That's well said, Stacy. Good point. And it's a great way to springboard and say as a show note that we have Bree the Plant Lady coming up in our fourth segment today. And we're going to check in with her, too, to get her interpretation of what an easy plant is.
You know, and I'm a horticulturist. Of course, you know, I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different plants and a lot of different aspects of plants in this noggin. But even I don't want a high maintenance garden. Like I have realized over time that what I'm looking for in my garden or from my garden is not something that like forces me to do a bunch of stuff. Like my plants work for me. I don't work for my plants. And so I don't have like, through the process of attrition, things that I said, oh, now I have a house. I really, really want to grow this. And I bent over backwards to try to get it. If the deer ate it, if it turned out it was too dry, if it turned out it was too sunny, I just let it go.
I like that approach. You're the boss, applesauce.
That's right. It. So anyway, what is low maintenance? I think when you're looking for low maintenance plants, easy care plants, easy to grow plants, you do need to define for yourself what is it you're willing to put in? What are the reasonable expectations for that plant with the work that you're going to put in and where you're going to plant it? But, you know, I know when people ask me, hey, like, what's an easy to grow shrub? What is the easiest Proven Winners Color Choice shrub that I can grow? You know, that's not an easy question to answer because it does depend on a lot of factors like the light, and not everyone is able to just like say, oh yeah, the spot is full sun or the spot is part sun or whatever. If pH is an issue, say like, you know, I'm not going to recommend an azalea if they aren't sure that they have acidic soil. So when people ask me and I don't have all those details, there is one plant that I come back to again and again and again. And the reason for it is because it's very versatile, it's very durable, grows everywhere, and most importantly, for the little bit of work you're going to have to put into it, it is going to give you huge rewards because that's what people want ultimately, right? They don't want to just say, I want a low maintenance plant, but it looks cruddy or it's really dull, really boring. It doesn't do anything but just like sit there. They want a plant that's going to look great and they don't have to work hard for it. And that plant is panicle hydrangeas.
I love that. I love that. The flowers last for a long part of the season, Stacy. And when people walk up to me in the garden center or greenhouse, generally I'll walk them over to the panicled hydrangea.
Yeah, and so people think hydrangeas are difficult to grow because all these different hydrangeas, there's 6 main types of hydrangeas that we grow in our gardens. They all get lumped together into one big confusing pile. And people don't understand that there are different hydrangeas, and that of those hydrangeas, in my opinion, panicle hydrangeas are the easiest to grow, the most, versatile, the most adaptable. So whatever conditions pretty much that you have, except for poorly drained soil, that is like the one thing they really can't take.
Yep.
They can grow in any of that. They can grow in USDA Zone 3. They are heat tolerant up to USDA Zone 8, even Zone 9 in the case of limelight hydrangea. And they just look amazing. I mean, there are few other plants that make such an impression all year round, but especially in summer, than a panicle hydrangea.
And the other beauty, Stacy, is that you don't necessarily have to pick a color because they tend to change color over the course of the season.
So you get that exciting, show. Yeah. So we have 14 different panicle hydrangeas in the Proven Winners Color Choice line. And so the hard part when I'm talking about easy to grow plants for me is picking which of those easy to grow panicle hydrangeas I am going to cover in this particular episode of Gardening Simplified. So I thought long and hard about it. I looked at what I've already covered in terms of panicle hydrangeas. Some of my absolute favorites have already been covered, like pufferfish, like Bobo. And so I went with Little Quickfire hydrangea for today's plant on trial.
Love it.
I love it too. And the reason that I picked this particular one is because it's right there in the name, Little Quickfire. So older panicle hydrangeas, certainly back in the day when PG was really the only one that was around, or Tardiva, those are huge plants. You can easily find mature PG hydrangeas in your neighborhood, possibly if it's an older neighborhood, that are 15, even 20 feet tall. Whereas these newer varieties, like Little Quickfire, reach only 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. So not only are they just as easy to grow as other panicle hydrangeas, they're a lot easier to use in your landscape because you don't have to worry about them overgrowing your dining room windows or growing up to your roof or outgrowing the space. They stay really nice and tidy. And that smaller size also gives them a lot of versatility in the landscape. So you can go ahead and add them to your flower garden. If you have a perennial garden or something like that, you can use them in your landscaping in your front yard as a low hedge, as a specimen. They're just a really, really versatile plant so that you can get that easy care, without having to think too much about where am I going to fit? Yeah, sure, it's easy care, but I don't have space for a 10-foot by 10-foot plant,
Right.
So
I love your choice though, Stacy, because I chose this plant, Little Quickfire, for my backyard because my daughter was going to be getting married in the backyard in June.
Ah.
And I felt it was reliable to be in bloom by the wedding date.
Yes, so Little Quickfire is a dwarf version of Quickfire, and
Yes.
Quickfire is a variety that we have offered for many, many years. It came to us from Mark Bulk, a wonderful plantsman in the Netherlands. He has a nursery in Boskoop, the big nursery district in the Netherlands. And but it's a beautiful plant, and it is the earliest blooming. So for us here in Michigan, Quickfire hydrangeas are typically in bloom by 4th of July.
Okay.
If you live in a warmer climate, that's going to be a little bit earlier. If you live in a much colder climate, that's going to be a little bit later. But it reaches about 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. So not huge, but definitely the kind of plant that you can't just impulse purchase and say, oh, I'll just find a place for this rather large shrub.
Right.
So in comes Little Quickfire. That was developed here by our new plant development team. And it reaches just 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. So really nice, versatile size. And it still has that very early bloom time. So blooming by early July for us. And this early bloom time has a couple of advantages that I think a lot of people may not realize. Number one is that if you live in a very cold climate, so it's hardy down to USDA Zone 3. So if you're in USDA Zone 3, 4, even USDA Zone 5, if you live up north, Mackinac Island, or out east in a cooler area, sometimes if the summer is especially cool, your panicle hydrangeas might not flower until the end of August. Kids are going back to school. You're thinking about mums and pumpkins. And here comes your panicle hydrangea it's summertime, let's party. And you're like, wait, what? So the nice thing, especially if you live in a cold climate, is that you're going to have that early bloom time. You're going to be able to enjoy it more for the summer. And not only that, but because it's blooming earlier, it's going to change color earlier. So panicle hydrangeas are the type of hydrangea that start out white, and then they take on various shades of pink, red, burgundy, or a combination of all of those as the season progresses. So the earlier your panicle hydrangea blooms, the longer you're going to be able to enjoy the color aspect of that hydrangea. And so that's another really big advantage, especially if you live in a colder climate. And I love the color of both Quickfire and Little Quickfire.
Fabulous.
It's a deep red. And I love the pinks. You know, I'm not generally a pink person in my garden, with a couple of exceptions like El Nino Catalpa, which I adore. But this is a nice deep red. It's also a lace cap flower.
I was going to say that. Lace cap, fabulous for pollinators.
Fabulous for pollinators. Just has a beautiful informal look that I personally love. And here I have been talking so much about how much I love Little Quickfire. I didn't even get to talking about how easy it is to care for, and we're out of time. But we have lots of information about that. And of course, I will put it all in the show notes. But take it from me, it's easy to grow. It's versatile. Full sun, part sun here in the north, no problem. Part sun in the south. We'll put all the details at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're answering your garden questions. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. It's time for us to answer your garden questions. The season is in swing. I'll bet people have questions. I even have questions when I'm out there. What I do if I have a question is I don't do anything. I wait until I can find out the answer. I don't act on impulse. Well, sometimes I do, but I try not to.
I talk to myself.
That works.
Yeah, I do.
Do you give yourself good answers?
I ask the question and then I answer my question.
Well,
yes.
Sometimes that does work. It's
It
like
does
you
work.
just pretend you're here in Studio A and you're, and you know, we're talking, and yeah, that's true. Sometimes you can talk yourself through a problem. But if you do have a garden issue, you can reach us at help, H-E-L-P, at Gardening Simplified on Air, or just go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, click the contact tab there. Also, we don't just take your questions, we take your garden celebrations and accomplishments as well. And we got a great one this week. We heard from a listener named Colin in USDA Zone 9B.
I love it.
I know you love that, and I'm sure you're jealous. So he's in Central Florida, and he sent 4 fabulous pictures, which you're going to be able to see if you're watching YouTube. Or, of course, you can go to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com to see the photos that Colin shared with us. And here's what he has to say. I would love to share pics of my first banana harvest on my beautiful banana tree. One harvest gave me 120 bananas.
Oh, man.
And I have a fresh new bunch coming along next. You could say it's going bananas.
As Beethoven would say, banana. Wow, he'd be proud of him.
Yes, so with annuals being planted all over the country this time of year, I also wanted to share pics of my Supertunia Vista bubblegums that I planted back on December 26th, 2023. Yes, they are winter annuals here in Florida, and they flourish. They still look great, so here's to more bananas and blooms over the summer.
You know, Proven Winners does trial annuals in Florida in winter just for that purpose. So December 26th, that's fantastic. While everybody's returning gifts at the department store, Colin is planting Supertunias and those bananas.
Right?
You would think he was living in Bananistan or New Peeland, but he's in Florida, Central Florida. I want to talk to Colin.
Yeah, so maybe we'll set something up, Colin, if you're open to it. The thing I love, bananas are very cool plants, and a lot of people don't realize how bananas grow. And you can actually see this in the picture that Colin sent. So they have these long flowers that come down on these long stems, and the petals kind of peel back and reveal the ovary or the banana fruit, and those get pollinated and turn into the bananas. So Colin's pictures are a great example of how unique bananas actually form within their flower and how beautiful they are. So can you even imagine having, like, just going out to your backyard and being like, guess I'll get a banana for breakfast. They're growing right here on my tree. So, you know, that one's for all the warm climate gardeners who wish they could grow lilacs or peonies or whatever thing we can grow up here. We are jealous of your bananas.
And Stacy, the pictures of the yard and the Supertunias beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Did you see the one is like, he's got like looks like a sunshine ligustrum. One of the super petunias is creeping up to the top of that because they're so robust down there.
Colin, he's not monkeying around. He's doing a great job there in Central Florida. And thank you for listening, watching the show too.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely want to take a look at those. It really goes to show you what a different world it must be gardening in Florida versus gardening up here, right?
Oh, you got it.
So what do we got in the mailbag?
Trang sends a question, probably an issue for a lot of people. Hello, Stacy and Rick. Help, the dreaded rose slug is back. Besides spraying, what can I do to protect my roses? Are there natural predators that prey on them? I've tried blasting them off with my watering hose, but they're still very small. I'm not so sure it's effective. And of course, we're talking here about the dreaded rose slug, but it's not really a slug in that sense of the word, right?
No, it's just called a rose slug. It's actually, well, I guess technically it would be considered like a maggot because it is the fly, a sawfly larva. But they have the unique characteristic of turning the identical color to your rose foliage. They are very hard to spot at first, especially when they're very small, as Trang says that hers are. But you find them not necessarily looking for them, but when they're very small, they make this very distinctive window-like damage on your rose because they are so small. Their little worm jaws or little sawfly jaws can't get through the full leaf tissue, and so they end up making a window because they only get through part of it. So it doesn't go all the way through and make a hole.
They don't finish the job.
They can't. Their jaws aren't big enough yet. So it's very distinctive. You can recognize that, and then when you start seeing those little windows appearing on your rose leaves, then you go, oh, better turn those over because the sawflies do feed from the underside typically, and then if your eyes are good, if the light's good, you will be able to identify that little rose slug. And you can just hand pick them, hand squish them, depending on how severe the infestation is. However, that may be much easier said than done because where there's one rose slug, there are many rose slugs.
A slug fest.
And a little bit of a rose slug infestation, your rose is going to be able to be fine. It's not really going to harm it. But I have seen very, very severe ones that basically eat all the foliage off a rose. And even really vigorous landscape roses aren't going to be able to withstand a whole lot of that before it starts to severely weaken them because they can't photosynthesize. They have no leaves. So a couple of things, it always helps to take the IPM approach and to learn about the life cycle of the pests that you're trying to manage. And in the case of the rose sawfly, what happens is these sawflies are going to metamorphosize next. So they're going to overwinter under your rose in the soil as a pupa, or kind of like you can think of it as like a cocoon if you're not familiar with this stage of an insect life cycle. So they overwinter as pupa in the soil, and then next spring they burst out, they mate, they lay eggs on your rose, it's just emerging, and the cycle is repeated. So one of the things that you can do is simply to cultivate around the base of your rose. So if you have mulch, clear that away, fluff it up, and then use like a rake or a little hand cultivator to kind of lightly rough up the soil. And what that's going to do is expose the cocoons that are down there. So you want to do this probably more like in the July, August, September time frame. Do that, maybe once a month. Just go out there, mix it all up. Birds, etc., will take care of any cocoons, and that can help a lot. When I was researching this, that's what I saw over and over again in university websites.
I agree 100%. And if you do it at that time of the year, Stacy, the roots, if you do any root damage, you shouldn't, but if you do some root damage, the rose can easily recover from that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And roses, we often talk about plants that are shallowly rooted. Roses aren't a terrible offender that way. They aren't like really shallow where you're going to be hitting a bunch of roots. I will put some links in the show notes, Trang, so you can do some research and read more on this life cycle. But do be aware, if we have listeners from warmer climates, I don't know exactly where Trang is located, there are some species of rose slugs, or in warmer climates, they have 2 generations a year. So this timing will only work if you're in a cooler climate and are dealing with a 1 generation a season rose slug. But to my knowledge, no, there's no specific natural predator. If a bird can see it, it will certainly eat it, just like it would any other little critter that it found on a plant, but you can't always count on that. So
Sounds good. All right, Myra planted 2 denim and lace Russian sage 2 years ago. I love that plant. They both did wonderfully last year, but this year one of them came back all tattered looking. It's half the size of the other one. And the third year being in the ground, instead of leaping, it's all rough and woody on the bottom like its cousin lavender. That's a good analogy,
yeah,
Mariah.
definitely.
What can I do? Can it be replanted elsewhere? I did want to mention a programming note here, Stacy, that in my research, I always thought that Russian sage was named after the great General Leonid Petrovsky. He was instrumental in dealing with the German invasion of the Soviet Union, and part of the reason they named the plant after him was because the pungent smell of Russian sage smelled like the boots of Russian soldiers. Well, I guess I was wrong.
Oh.
It's not the case. It was named by a Russian botanist around 1840 after Perovsky, the Turkestani governor of the Russian province of Orenburg. So if you ever have one of those Cliff Clavin cheers moments and somebody asks you, now you know.
There you go. Okay, I did not know that. So Myra did send pictures of her Russian sage, so that is always very helpful when we're diagnosing issues. So overall, I don't think that the plant looks too bad. Russian sage is what is considered a subshrub, and I'm glad that she mentioned lavender because lavender is also a subshrub. Right. So basically what that means is that they have a bit of a woody base, but herbaceous on the top. And so that's totally common. So you mentioned the woody base, that's totally within the regular behavior of this plant. So that's nothing to be concerned of in and of itself. And when I look at the plant, I do see that it's a bit stunted compared to its neighbor. But I did notice something else in the photos, and that is that there is landscape fabric. And so there's landscape fabric under the mulch. And what that does is that keeps a lot of moisture around the plant. And Russian sage is a very not just drought tolerant, but it wants really dry and well-drained conditions. So if it's getting overly wet, especially if it's wet in the winter or the spring when it's, emerging, if you had very heavy clay soil and it was a very cold climate, the plant would just die. Right. So it's kind of even amazing that it's staying alive and has lived as well as it has under those conditions. So Myra, I think that the best thing that you can do is to brush back that mulch, cut away the landscape fabric for a good 18 inches around the plant, and then put the mulch back. That's fine. But the landscape fabric really makes a difference in how much moisture it holds into the soil.
Perfectly said.
Yep. So that's what I would do. If you do want to transplant it, that's perfectly fine too. You can do that now, but ideally I would wait until next spring or this fall when it is dormant. We got to take a little break. When we come back, we've got a special guest for Branching News, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, Branching News here on the show. And for today's Branching News, an interview with a wonderful lady, Bree the Plant Lady. We're going to talk to her. And by the way, her website, briegrows.com. So that's BRIE grows.com. And I was thinking, Stacy, if we were going to talk about easy plants, we should talk to Bree for a number of reasons. Number one, of course, she knows her stuff. Number two, she's down there in hot North Carolina. And number three, talk about an energetic and enthusiastic person who plants all kinds of stuff. I can't keep up with her. And I think she's the perfect person to ask about easy plants.
Well, the busier the gardener, the more they need some easy plants. Otherwise, they won't have time for anything.
Exactly. So, Bree, welcome to the Gardening Simplified Show. And I got to mention right off the bat, I noticed that you just got an award, Club Horticulture Commendation for the Garden Club of America. Now, that's really cool. What a great recognition for you.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for having me back. And yes, it was such a surprise and an honor to receive that. I love the Garden Club of America for all that they do in their horticulture outreach. And, I have it hanging proudly on my wall right by my diploma.
Well, it is much deserved, Bree, and you are one of the most enthusiastic gardeners that I know, and I encourage people to go to your website, briegrows.com, and of course, Bree has also written some books, so make sure to take a look at that also. So, Bree, is there anything easy to grow down there? I'm saying down there because we're broadcasting from Michigan, but down there. And of course, you would know, Bree, you are a Michigan native, right?
That's right. I'm a former Michigander. I've been in North Carolina now 22 years, and we actually have a lot of Michiganders living here in the Raleigh area. So I feel like I'm in good company. This is a challenging environment to grow in because, frankly, everything that you do in the north is upside down here. We have a 12-month growing season, and a lot of the plants that you would grow as summer annuals in Michigan are winter annuals here. And that takes a lot of effort to navigate figuring out the seasonality of plants because the plant tags don't always give you that detail.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're for the whole country, not just, regional plant tags, as you no doubt know, would drive this industry crazy. So it does take, that regional expertise to really be able to maximize those unique opportunities.
It does. And I feel an endless amount of job security as more Northerners move south but want to continue to garden and they need advice.
For sure.
But I have to say, my favorite easy plant for the summer is mangave. I am mad about mangave, like irrational. I am trying to collect every variety that they have. I think I currently have a live wall filled with mangave.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to divide them so that both sides of the wall are planted with them because that's what a rational person would do. And I think I have almost 100 individual plants now.
Wow. Now, Bree, I don't know that our listeners know what a mangave is, and they're probably sitting there going, is she saying mangave? I know agave. I don't know mangave. So for the enlightenment of our listeners, can you tell them what a mangave is?
Well, mangave was actually bred and created up near you at Walter's Garden.
Yeah.
And it's an intergeneric hybrid, which for plant people, that's super special. That's like putting a cat and a dog together. And it's a Manfreda agave hybrid. And what you end up with is this agave structure that isn't prickly, that has really cool colors and textures. And some of the varieties have spots and some are striped and some get really big and some are perfect for pots. And they're really amazing. They don't need a lot of water, which is the main thing. They just look fabulous, and the deer leave them alone. So if there's all these reasons to collect mangaves, they're not reliably hardy in the winter here, but they make great houseplants. So it's one of those plants that you can bring inside and enjoy during the cool season and then put outside and forget it all summer long. It's just everybody needs mangave. Period.
That's fabulous. Where, Bree, where do you store yours in winter? Is it an unheated shed? Where do you put them?
I actually put them in the crawl space with grow lights.
Wow.
Wow.
And actually, they're really fun to show people at dinner parties because it just makes you seem that much more insane.
I love it.
The underneath of your house completely full of mangave.
So what's your oldest mangave then? The one that you've had the longest?
I have had Kaleidoscope was my very first.
Okay.
And it pups pretty readily. So it's one of those that every year when I pot it up, I can divide it and share it with people. And I was fortunate. I worked with Hans Hansen, worked with him loosely when I was the production manager at Plant Delight. And he's a longtime friend. He's the breeder of the mangaves, and he sent some to trial just to see, and this was part of the original trial pack. And I cherish them in so many ways. But hands down, they are the plants that every visitor asks about because they're so dynamic and interesting, but you're not going to poke your eye out with them. And I don't grow any agave at all because I'm afraid I'll hurt myself.
Sure. Yeah, they
so
can
I
be
give
very
myself
dangerous.
full permission to grow all the mangaves.
And a lot of people are even afraid, if you're not going to hurt yourself, they're afraid of their pets, cats, dogs, kids. There's a lot of reasons to be concerned. Now, I would think that most people are surprised that you can grow them so successfully in a humid climate like North Carolina.
And they just thrive. It's incredible. They really don't require desert conditions. And that's partly the Manfreda, tendencies coming out. They're vigorous and, well, they're just amazing. And actually when they flower, the flower spikes are really impressive, just like an agave. They might go 8 to 10 foot tall. They attract so many different pollinators. It's really, really a sight to behold.
Wow.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about the agave and hurting yourself. We used to ship them up from Florida up here to Michigan and then unpackaging them. Boy, you reach into that box. There are times when especially you could poke your eyes out with that thing. It's like the BB gun in the Christmas Story, right? Yeah, exactly. Now, Bree, we were talking also about the fact that Stacy and I both feel that herbs would probably be a good plant to put in the easy category. Would you agree? And if so, which of the herbs do you think are easy to grow?
I absolutely agree. And I always say herbs are the gateway to foodscaping. But my hands down, without hesitation, favorite herb is amazel basil. That is a game-changing plant. It's incredible. It thrives through the summer. You can make enough pesto to feed your entire county because it's so vigorous, and it's delicious. It's disease-free. I just love amazel basil. It's the one basil that I think no one can live a happy life without.
I agree. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, it's so popular. Honestly, I have been looking for it. I think it's since it's got such a reputation for all of that disease resistance and everything, you have to snap it up when you find it because otherwise it will sell out.
Yeah. It's a no-brainer.
That is very true.
I call it basil instinct, Bree. Bree Grows is the website, BRIE-grows.com. Bree, the plant lady. Look for her on YouTube. Of course, she speaks all around the country and has written books. And, of course, I got to know Bree based on the Foodscaping book. Bree, if you were to pick, other than herbs, a vegetable plant that you like to grow that you think is easy peasy, what do you think?
Oh, well, I wish I could say tomatoes, but tomatoes in the South break your heart in 1,000 different ways, and so they keep you humble. So I guess they're good for one thing. But really, I think I'm torn between eggplants and peppers. I like how productive they are, how heat tolerant. I have this terrible tick-borne illness called alpha-gal where I'm anaphylactically allergic to everything from a mammal. So I grow a lot of vegetables just because I eat more vegetables than the average person because it's kind of all I'm left with to be able to eat.
Sure.
And I like how reliable eggplants and peppers are. That I can go out and harvest every day. Wow. I don't have to store a whole bunch in the refrigerator. And, we're just getting into that season. I mean, I also kind of live on zucchini. So we're just getting into the season where zucchini will start producing. And, those are three vegetables that are near daily staples for me. And when I don't have to buy them from the store, it feels so much better.
It's the ultimate luxury to be able to go in your backyard and get them. It's like the store's in your backyard. And it's way better.
Exactly. And it saves a lot of space in your refrigerator. We've been laughing. I eat like 5 heads of cauliflower a week. And that's like having 5 basketballs stored in the refrigerator.
You're right.
I grow cauliflower in the winter season just because there's not room in the refrigerator for my cauliflower habit.
Bree, are you like me where especially when we get to summer, I absolutely crave stuffed peppers. I love stuffed green peppers. My favorite.
I do. And I, of course, can have them with ground turkey. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to be completely deprived, even though I'm mammal free. I'm fortunate that I can still eat fish and poultry safely. So
that's fantastic.
I love stuffed peppers.
All right. So in the heat of summer, you need some shade there in North Carolina. Bree, how about a tree that you think is really rewarding and easy to grow, or maybe one on your property that you really enjoy? What do you think?
Ooh, a tree. Gosh,
yeah, for shade.
Mm-hmm. I immediately went to hydrangeas for shade because I just walked around my yard and realized I have 57 cultivars.
Oh my
Whoa.
gosh.
And I told myself that I wasn't a hydrangea person.
Funny how that happens, isn't it?
What is going on? But a tree. Well, I'm really encouraged by the plant breeding that's being done at NC State through Dr. Tom Rainey.
Mm-hmm.
And this year he gave me the new hybrid dogwood that's 3/4 native, 1/4 Kusa.
Ooh.
And it has really great disease resistance. And, it's going to just long-term be the option to have because disease is wiping out our native dogwoods. And I just really appreciate his proactiveness in breeding for the future and recognizing the problems. And I feel honored to have one of the very first ones to be planted. And every day I go out and talk to it. So, I do have it planted in shade. It's too young. It didn't bloom this year, but it's I think settling in well. And I do think it's a plant that will be a pretty dominant fixture in the industry in years to come. So be on the lookout for it. I don't think it technically has a name yet.
Ooh. So we got a little sneak preview here.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
we do sing Dr. Rainey's praises on the show all the time. Of course, he is an absolutely brilliant plant breeder and problem solver.
And here in North Carolina, we feel very fortunate to claim him as ours.
Indeed.
He's making the world a better place every single day. It's amazing how his breeding has touched so many people's lives and gardens.
For sure. Yeah.
You are one of the most enthusiastic gardeners I know, and even 100-degree humid heat in North Carolina isn't going to stop you. So tell our listeners and our viewers, Bree, what are you excited about this year? What are you really looking forward to?
Well, I went down to a nursery near Wilmington and brought a Prius load of Rockin' Fuchsia salvias home.
Mm-hmm.
And I am irrationally excited about this plant. So they're already in full bloom. They're only going to get bigger and better. And the hummingbirds have recently arrived, and they love this plant so much.
They do.
So I'm actually going back down next week, and I think I'm going to get another Prius load.
So which is your favorite color of the series? I'm curious.
Well, I love them all, but the one that I keep gravitating towards is fuchsia. And it's really funny because I didn't think of myself as a pink person. Now I have this entire front border that's just bright pink and looks awesome. It looks beautiful with my blue house. And I also got a bunch of the white proven winner Cleomes, that are sterile.
Yeah.
And they just are so reliable blooming. And that fuchsia and white together, it's gorgeous. It's like drop dead, stop in your tracks. My neighbors stop and come over and take pictures, and they're like, will you just please label more so that we know what to buy?
You're going to have a QR code in your front yard and scan for the plant list.
I really do need it. What I need is a tech-savvy intern. Is anyone out there that's tech-savvy? Get in touch with me.
Oh, that's great. I'm with you on that hummingbird thing. The Rockin' Fuchsia, I put them in pots all the way leading up my front steps. And Bree, you'd be happy to hear on the lakeshore here in Michigan just this past week, yes, mine are in bloom too, and I saw hummingbirds already, so it's fantastic.
Oh, that's so exciting.
It certainly is.
That and that Vermillionaire Cufia.
That is one of my must-haves every year too, yeah.
Bree,
For me, that's actually been hardy. So it's really exciting because they come back.
It must get huge then. That's really cool.
I planted...
they die all the way down, but
Okay.
they do. They get 3x3. It's awesome.
Love it.
I planted one this year, Bree, based on Stacy nudging me on that plant. She loves that plant, and so I'm giving it a try this year. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, you will not be disappointed.
Well, I always joke I don't want to be the person who just plants the same annuals every year, but I have turned into that because I love that plant so much. I simply can't have a summer without it.
I totally agree. And to be honest, I hope more breeding continues with Cufia because there are a lot of species that really haven't been explored, and they're so reliable that they bloom for the entire growing season. There's so many colors and shapes and forms, and I would love to see Kufia bred for hanging baskets, so they kind of dangle down. And I have all these dreams for plant breeders.
So if anyone's listening,
exactly. Can you just call me and we'll go over my wish list?
Bree, both Stacy and I really like the summerific hibiscus, the dinner plate type hibiscus. In North Carolina, with all the sun and heat that you have, how does a plant like that do there?
They do really well, though we do have some pretty serious insect problems.
Okay.
A lot of times they will just almost look like lace because they have no foliage left. And in part that's because I don't spray any pesticides. I just kind of like, well, it still will flower. So I'm very strategic when I'm taking the pictures of my hibiscus because there's almost no green on the leaves, but the flowers are amazing. And I like to underplant those with different colors of coleus, different varieties of coleus, like El Brido and Dipped in Wine. And Proven Winners has really done the most incredible job with their coleus collection. And yes. I know a lot of these are coming from Dr. Dave Clark out of Florida, which means they're really good performers for me because, they like heat and humidity, and they're just so reliable for providing that oomph that you want. Even in the hottest days of the summer, they don't lose their color and vigor.
Wow, that's saying something too.
Yeah, you bet. So as we enter the heat of summer, before we let you go here, Bree, give our listeners, viewers, some advice on dealing with the heat. I'm not talking about us personally, but I'm talking about as gardeners having success in the heat of summer. How do you approach it? What's your go-to strategy in the heat of summer?
Soil prep.
Okay.
Without even a single
I'm glad
bit of
you said that.
questioning.
Yeah.
The more time you spend adding organic matter to the ground you grow in, the easier the experience will be, the less irrigating you have to do, the stronger your plants will be. I mean, not to say that you're going to go without watering, because the weather is usually not that reliable to give you the rain exactly when you need it. But when you put your time and energy into soil, every other part of gardening becomes more fun. So add more organic matter. Always and forever.
No question about it. She is Bree the Plant Lady. Look for her on YouTube. Of course, her website, breegrows.com. Look for her books. Bree, just greatly appreciate your enthusiasm. And again, congratulations on that award. Club Horticulture Commendation from the Garden Club of America, but I really think it suits you well because your enthusiasm for gardening and what you do for the industry is much appreciated by many, ourselves included, and we appreciate you joining us on the Gardening Simplified show.
Well, you are so welcome, and thank you so much. I love catching up with you and talking about plants.
Thanks so much, Bree. It's always a pleasure. Good luck gardening this year.
Houston, the ship is at Stable 1. Those were the words of Jim Lovell on Apollo 13. Today's show feels like a rocket ship to me. It's so much information packed in, and Stacy, always a privilege and pleasure to do the show with you.
Likewise, Rick.
And thanks so much, Adriana. Thank you. And most of all, thanks to you. Thanks for tuning us in. Again, a reminder, we are a podcast. We are a radio show. And we are a YouTube show. So pick which one you like or pick all three. Yeah. We'd love that. And have yourself a great week. Thank you.